I stood in the back of the packed conference hall, my heart pounding in my chest as Marcus confidently presented my life's work on that massive screen. My algorithm, my code, my sleepless nights, all being claimed by the man who fired me 3 months earlier. The audience erupted in applause while bile rose in my throat. What Marcus didn't know was that this moment of theft would become the first domino in his spectacular downfall, and my most unexpected comeback. 6 months earlier, I was just Andrew Chen, a hungry, ambitious coder with dreams bigger than my studio apartment. When QuantumSoft offered me a position on their development team, I practically ran to sign the contract. This wasn't just another tech startup. They were pioneering predictive analytics that could revolutionize supply chain management. The kind of work that changes industries. The kind of work I'd dreamed about since college. My desk was nothing special, wedged between the printer and a support beam, but I treated it like hallowed ground. While others clocked out at 5, I'd lose myself in code until security would gently remind me the building was closing. There was something almost meditative about solving impossible problems, watching as lines of code transformed into solutions no one had seen before. 3 weeks in, I stumbled onto a pattern recognition approach that could potentially increase prediction accuracy by 37%. Not an incremental improvement, a breakthrough. That's when Marcus took notice of me. Department head, industry veteran, and the man with the connections to make or break careers at QuantumSoft. "You've got something special, Andrew," he told me, leaning against my desk one evening, his expensive watch glinting under the fluorescent lights. "I see myself in you." Those words lit a fire in me. Marcus began inviting me to his office for brainstorming sessions, offering guidance on my algorithm's development. He'd place his hand on my shoulder, call me the future of this company. I soaked it all in, desperate for validation, blind to the calculation behind his smiles. Over the next 3 months, I poured everything into developing what we began calling Nexus, a self-learning prediction engine that could analyze variables no human would think to connect. Weekends disappeared. My girlfriend left me, tired of competing with my laptop for attention. But I barely noticed. I was building something revolutionary. Marcus seemed to understand, bringing me coffee during late nights, listening intently as I explained complex technical challenges. "We're going to change the world with this, kid," he'd say. I never noticed how he always said "we" when talking to me, but "my project" when speaking to executives. The warning signs were there. How Marcus would casually ask me to just email the latest build before important meetings I wasn't invited to. How he'd return with congratulations but vague explanations about feedback. The time I overheard him taking credit for my solution to a particularly thorny caching problem, dismissing my contribution as my team's implementation of my concept. Even the way his executive assistant would look at me with something like pity. But I ignored every red flag. I was too captivated by the mentor I thought I'd found, too consumed by the elegance of the algorithm taking shape before me. And when Marcus asked me to prepare comprehensive documentation just for our records, I worked through 2 nights to create the clearest, most detailed technical Bible possible. I wanted to impress him. I had no idea I was crafting the very manual he'd use to understand my work after I was gone. The instructions for how to steal what I'd built. Some nights, lying awake in my apartment, I still taste the bitterness of how thoroughly I enabled my own betrayal. The shift was subtle at first. Meetings I'd previously been central to were suddenly executives only. My name disappeared from project update emails. Marcus began locking his office door during calls. When I asked about the changing dynamics, he'd brush it off with practiced ease. "Just politics, Andrew. I'm protecting you from the bureaucracy so you can focus on what you do best." I nodded, believing him, while something cold and uneasy settled in my stomach. Then came the San Francisco presentation. QuantumSoft was unveiling our quarterly innovations to the board, and Nexus was meant to be the centerpiece. I'd prepared for weeks, rehearsing technical explanations, anticipating questions. The night before, Marcus called me. Slight change of plans. The board wants a more high-level overview, so I'll handle the presentation. Just send me your latest slides. I complied, disappointed, but still trusting. The next morning I arrived early, coffee in hand, only to be stopped by security. "Your name's not on the attendance list, sir." My calls to Marcus went straight to voicemail. I waited 7 excruciating hours in the lobby until the meeting ended. When the doors finally opened, I caught glimpses of enthusiastic board members congratulating Marcus. He saw me standing there, confusion etched across my face, and for a split second, something like guilt flickered in his eyes before he turned away, laughing at some executive's joke. I followed him to the elevator, demanding answers. "It's complicated, Andrew. The board responded better than we hoped. I had to make executive decisions on the fly." His voice was calm, rehearsed. "We'll discuss next steps tomorrow." That discussion never happened. Instead, at 9:07 the next morning, I was called to HR. Patricia, with her corporate smile and dead eyes, sat across from me as she explained I was being terminated due to performance concerns and cultural fit issues. The severance packet slid across the desk seemed almost insulting. 2 weeks' pay for what I'd given them. "This is bullshit, and you know it," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Nexus is my creation." Patricia's smile never wavered. "All intellectual property belongs to QuantumSoft. As per your contract, security will escort you to collect your personal items." I walked to my desk in a daze, a security guard hovering behind me like I was a criminal. As I packed my meager belongings into a cardboard box, I noticed Marcus watching from his office. Something snapped inside me. I dropped the box and marched straight to him, ignoring the security guard's protests. "You stole my work," I said, close enough to see the pores on his face. Marcus stepped back, straightening his tie. "Be reasonable, Andrew. The company owns everything you developed here." "You know damn well what you did," I hissed, my finger jabbing at his chest. Something smug crossed his face then, the look of a man who knew he'd won and wanted his opponent to feel it. "Prove it," he whispered, just between us. The rage exploded like a supernova. My hand connected with his face in a slap that echoed through the open office. People gasped. Marcus stumbled back, shock replacing his smugness. Security grabbed me roughly, twisting my arm behind my back as I was dragged toward the elevator. "You'll never work in this industry again," Marcus shouted, his cheek reddening where I'd struck him. As the elevator doors closed on my career, my hands shook with a combination of fury and terror. What had I done? How would I recover from this? It wasn't until I reached my apartment and emptied my box that I discovered something that turned my blood to ice. Marcus had filed a preliminary patent application for Nexus. My name appeared nowhere in the documents. The algorithm I'd birthed, line by painstaking line, was now legally being claimed by the man who fired me. I sat on my kitchen floor, surrounded by the evidence of my naivety, and let the tears finally come. Rock bottom has a particular smell. Stale coffee and unwashed clothes, the scent of a man who's stopped caring. For 2 weeks, I barely left my apartment, cycling between rage, despair, and paralyzing self-doubt. I'd replay conversations with Marcus in my head, seeing all the manipulations I'd missed. The worst part wasn't losing my job. It was the theft of something I'd poured my soul into, something that mattered. On day 15 of my self-imposed exile, my phone buzzed with a text from Raj, a former colleague. Marcus struggling to answer basic questions about Nexus implementation. Executives getting nervous. Something stirred inside me. Not quite hope, but its distant cousin. I sat up, really looking at my apartment for the first time in days. The place was a disaster, much like my life. But amid the chaos, my laptop sat on the coffee table, waiting. I showered, shaved, and made a decision. Marcus could steal my past, but he wouldn't steal my future. I began methodically reconstructing my evidence. As a developer, I'd habitually backed up my work to a personal cloud server. Not the code itself, which legally belonged to QuantumSoft, but my development journals, progression logs, timestamps of breakthroughs. I'd taken photos of whiteboards after brainstorming sessions, saved drafts of emails showing my thought process. None of it was enough to legally reclaim Nexus, but together they told an irrefutable story of creation. Next, I reached out to Professor Zhang, my mentor from graduate school. "I need honest feedback on an idea," I told him over coffee. I outlined a concept that had been germinating in my mind during those dark weeks, not just a recreation of Nexus, but its evolution, something that addressed limitations I hadn't had time to solve at QuantumSoft. Zhang listened intently, asking pointed questions that pushed my thinking further. By the time our cups were empty, excitement had replaced the hollowness in my chest. "This isn't just viable, Andrew," he said finally. "This could be revolutionary." I threw myself into development with a ferocity that made my previous work ethic seem lazy. Days blurred together in a symphony of coding, testing, and refinement. I called it Phoenix, named for obvious reasons. Where Nexus was powerful but rigid, Phoenix was adaptive and elegant. I built it to learn from its mistakes, to grow stronger with each challenge. In my darker moments, I saw parallels with my own journey. Meanwhile, I cultivated relationships I'd neglected, while head down at QuantumSoft. Former classmates now at competing firms. Industry journalists looking for insider perspectives. Venture capitalists hungry for the next big thing. I never explicitly mentioned Marcus or made accusations. I didn't have to. Silicon Valley runs on gossip and pattern recognition. When someone mentioned QuantumSoft's upcoming Nexus launch was behind schedule, I'd just raise an eyebrow. When rumors circulated about implementation problems, I'd change the subject with conspicuous care. 3 months after my firing, I stood trembling outside the offices of Vortex Ventures, clutching a presentation folder. Samira Khan, a notoriously tough VC with a perfect track record for identifying unicorns, had agreed to give me 15 minutes. I'd prepared for hours, rehearsing answers to every possible question. But when I finally sat across from her, something unexpected happened. Instead of launching into my pitch, I told her the truth. All of it. The creation, the betrayal, the fall, and the resurrection. "Everyone in this building wants to sell me a success story," Samira said when I finished, her expression unreadable. "You're the first to walk in with a failure story that turned into something better." She leaned forward. "Show me this Phoenix." The demo wasn't perfect. There were glitches I was still resolving. But the core functionality performed beautifully. Samira watched in silence as Phoenix analyzed test data, finding patterns human analysts had missed. When the screen finally went dark, she studied me for an uncomfortably long moment. "QuantumSoft is announcing Nexus at the Bay Area Tech Summit next month," she said finally. "Marcus Davies is keynoting." She slid a piece of paper across the table. "An invitation to the exclusive event. Let's see if your Phoenix can rise from these particular ashes. I'll have a term sheet ready, depending on what happens there." As I left her office, invitation clutched in my hand. My phone buzzed with a news alert. QuantumSoft stock drops on rumors of product delays. For the first time since that day in the lobby, I smiled. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. The Bay Area Tech Summit transformed the convention center into a temple of innovation, with QuantumSoft's booth dominating the main hall. I adjusted my visitor badge, feeling simultaneously out of place and exactly where I needed to be. Samira's team had secured me a spot near the back for Marcus's keynote, close enough to witness, far enough to remain unnoticed. My stomach churned with a cocktail of anticipation and dread as the lights dimmed. Marcus took the stage to enthusiastic applause, looking every bit the successful tech visionary in his tailored suit. "Today," he announced, voice brimming with practiced charisma, "QuantumSoft redefines predictive analytics with Nexus." The presentation began impressively. Slick videos, compelling use cases, stunning graphics. But then came the technical demonstration, and I leaned forward, recognizing the moment reality would collide with Marcus's facade. The first question from the audience was innocuous. "Can you elaborate on how the system handles anomalous data points?" Marcus answered smoothly, though I noted he avoided specifics. The second question dug deeper into the architecture. Marcus deflected with a joke about proprietary information. By the third technical question, beads of sweat were visible on his forehead. He wasn't just struggling, he was drowning in complexity he'd never bothered to understand. "Perhaps," called a voice from the middle rows, "you could explain the differential approach to pattern recognition that makes Nexus unique?" I recognized Raj immediately. My old colleague hadn't just sent me intel, he'd positioned himself as my unwitting ally. Marcus fumbled through buzzwords that made no technical sense together, his confident veneer cracking visibly. In that moment, executives throughout the room realized what I had known all along. Marcus couldn't explain Nexus because Marcus hadn't created Nexus. I slipped out before the disastrous presentation ended, making my way to the small meeting room Samira had reserved. Within an hour, 3 QuantumSoft investors found their way to me, each asking pointed questions about my alternative solution. By evening, whispers about Phoenix had spread through the conference like wildfire. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with connection requests and meeting invitations. The following week passed in a blur of due diligence meetings and demonstrations. Phoenix wasn't just attracting interest, it was causing a feeding frenzy. When Horizon Technologies, QuantumSoft's largest competitor, offered to acquire my fledgling company for 8 figures, Samira advised patience. "They're not just buying technology," she explained. "They're buying the narrative. David versus Goliath. Let it build." She was right. 2 weeks later, QuantumSoft's stock had plummeted 30% amid rumors of technical problems with Nexus and executive infighting. The acquisition offer from Horizon had doubled. I signed the papers in their gleaming headquarters, hands shaking slightly as I formally became their Chief Innovation Officer, with Phoenix as their new flagship product. The moment should have felt like pure triumph, but something still felt unfinished. That evening, I found myself driving to QuantumSoft, compelled by a need for closure I couldn't explain. Security was lighter now, budget cuts had already begun, and I easily made my way to the familiar floor. Most desks were empty at this hour, but light spilled from Marcus's office. I stood in his doorway, watching him frantically pack items into a cardboard box. The irony not lost on me. He looked up, shock registering when he recognized me. "Come to gloat?" he asked, voice ragged. The man before me bore little resemblance to the confident manipulator who had ruined my career. His tie hung loosely around his neck. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. "I came to understand," I said simply, stepping into the office. "Why risk everything to steal someone else's work? You were already successful." Marcus laughed bitterly. "You think innovation happens in straight lines? I made my career packaging other people's brilliance. Nexus was just exceptional." He gestured vaguely at the emptying office beyond his door. "The board offered me a choice: resignation or termination." I should have felt vindicated watching him reduced to this. Instead, I felt a strange emptiness. You could have mentored me? We could have built something remarkable together. That's not how the game works, he muttered, sealing his box with tape. There are creators and there are sellers. I recognized which one you were, which one I wasn't anymore. He looked up at me, something like respect flickering in his tired eyes. For what it's worth, Phoenix is brilliant, better than Nexus could have been. I left him there, surrounded by the debris of his fallen empire. As I walked through the quiet office where I'd once dreamed and created, I passed a whiteboard still covered with desperate attempts to reverse engineer my work. 3 months earlier, I would have given anything to see Marcus ruined. Now, his downfall felt less like victory and more like a cautionary tale. The following Monday, I walked into Horizon's development department as their new executive. The team, my team, waited nervously for their first interaction with the wunderkind who had taken down Quantum Soft. Among them, I recognized several faces from my former company. Later, I would learn they had jumped ship as Marcus's leadership imploded. The first thing you should know about me, I began, looking at each of them, is that I believe innovation thrives on collaboration and proper attribution. There are no stolen ideas here, just shared victories. The tension visibly eased as nods spread through the room. That afternoon, I received an unexpected email from Raj, now working at a startup across town. Attached was a photo from the Quantum Soft lobby. Workers removing the company logo as part of an acquisition by a multinational conglomerate. The text simply read, "Full circle. Well played." As I closed my laptop that evening, watching the sunset from my new corner office, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. Marcus had taught me lessons he never intended, about resilience, authenticity, and the unstoppable power of creation. He had fired me to claim my work as his own, never realizing that what makes a true innovator isn't the ability to steal ideas, but the relentless drive to create even better ones from the ashes of betrayal. In trying to take everything from me, he had inadvertently given me the greatest gift possible. The understanding that while code can be copied, the mind that creates it cannot.